Dear brothers, dear sisters, today we are happy to be here among you to do an explanation of some things that are happening in terms of the church.
And we see an article
On a website that we have even included in the description,
which gives us this very serious news, saying that the main Catholic publishers in Spain are coming together to urgently ask the bishops to convene a conclave. So it means that things are moving in such a way that all sectors from the church all around the world, they are becoming aware of a very serious problem. And along with this awareness, they are also seeking a solution. And I think it's interesting for us to comment too about this event that happened in Argentina at the end of December, precisely on December 17th, which is the birthday, Francisco's date of birth, right there, in the land where he was born. From a lightning bolt. There's a sanctuary there, covered with lightning rods and protection for that. But right in that place, a lightning bolt fell, and that lightning struck. See you later. From the hand of Saint Peter. So, we even put it in the description for people to see, because there are people who question the fact. But you realize through this article that the very priests who work at that shrine issue a public statement rejecting any kind of symbolic interpretation, but confirming the occurrence of this lightning bolt that struck the key from Saint Peter's hand and also dissolved the crown. So, as we know, the keys to that statue of Saint Peter, they were there to represent the power that Christ gave to Peter, the power to govern the church, that is, to open and close according to the church's governing logic. And when we see this statue receiving this sign, because this is a thing which, although it has a natural physical explanation, also has a supernatural meaning to show that currently we do not have on earth a true successor of Peter who is there with the power of the keys. This is necessary because this power of the keys, as we usually say, is exactly the exercise of the papacy. So indeed this coincides with Francisco's birthday in his land for people to realize in a more evident way. It's not that he lost the papacy now, but that he's not the true successor of Peter, and that he doesn't hold the keys to govern England. He makes it clear when he says that the church has no walls. And when he says this, he is showing that he does not believe that the papacy can open or close. For him, it's just to open.
But the church also needs a government.
In other words, a chat that can say, look, this can't, this is not good, this is out, this is excommunicated, these people can't get in, so I close. So, whoever finds another, that's it. So all these are small things, but they have a symbolic representation. And we have to take advantage of this to show that God is giving signs to those who want to see. It's a simple thing, but it has a meaning. So now, these representatives from the Spanish media came together to ask.
They asked the bishops for a conclave. Then they say,
Oh,
that calls a conclave.
This is a joint editorial by Vicente Montesinos, Adoration and Liberation, then Francisco Bendala, El Digital Spanish, and the other one is Henry Di Diego, Rambla Libre. All these three, supported by many others, say the following: we representing 3 digital Catholic groups that encompass a good part of the Catholic public opinion in Spain. We appeal to the cardinals and bishops do not recognize the false prophet Francisco as Pope, and that they are not unite with the Bergoglio, and that they remain faithful to the faith of our Lord Jesus Christ and devoted to the Holy Eucharist, so they can take on the tremendous circumstances of this general apostasy historic moment. In the same way, we appeal to all those who still recognize the Bergoglio as papal to join the previous select group to be able to legitimately fulfill what we are going to ask. A conclave should be summoned to provide the Catholic Church with a genuine Pope. We here are people who are accustomed to doing journalistic work, to cover the church events, to announce what's happening in the world regarding faith. And all this, they are convinced that Francisco does not represent the Catholic Church. So they say the Church is the communion of saints with the holy martyrs and all those who have preceded us in the kingdom of heaven. The Church is suffering now of this tremendous disorder, of this general apostasy of Jorge Mario Pergola, and of many saint cardinals and peers. Apostasy is general, so we are committed to understanding the problem and assuming our responsibility. Not only Mario Bergoglio, it's Satan who rules the Vatican, but the entire hierarchy of the various nations. Bergoglio is a false pope who manipulated Conclave with the Saint Gallen Mafia by what is excommunicated from the sentence, according to the dictated norm in the universe and dominion of the churches, which was promulgated by John Paul II. So it is, Joe. It's interesting for us to always analyze this, because these are people who followed and still support the Vatican II Church, and they agree with all these talks and followed these church reforms, but they no longer want to recognize Francisco with true successor of the Catholic popes of all times. So, are you appealing to this document by John Paul II saying that Francisco had no legitimacy for that election that took place there in 2013? All their acts, appointments, and cancellations are invalid. The Church's false teaching in these dark times is subject to the globalist satanic powers. A false religion is preached that has nothing to do with Christianity and the salvation of souls, but with superstition, moral dissolution that resembles Nicolaitan heresy, which God abhors in the Apocalypse, of denying truths in a new Iranism with the spread of blatant lies like climate change, the favoring of Islamic invasion, and even the coercion of the false hierarchy of consciousness in favor of things that have unleashed millions of deaths, sick people, people suffering adverse effects due to all this movement. What is being done to decrease the world population, as we know? So, all this satanic madness, it was described by the infamous Bergoglio as an act of love. And the text continues. They want to turn the church into Maomgi in service of the malevolent and satanic 2030 agenda with which the depraved elites want to enslave the world and exterminate the human species. Time is pressing for the celebration of a legitimate and valid conclave, while the cancellations of the good shepherds continue simply because they defend the gospel. The shepherds are there to protect God's people and oppose the genocidal designs of the globalist elites, not to hand them over to extermination by greedy pharmaceutical companies ready to spread pain and death. the serious personal and collective sin of the hierarchy cries out to heavens and divine justice and demands extreme reparation. We, ordinary Catholics, appeal to these worldly clerics, to the sensus fidei of the Catholics, so that they may seek good clerics, those who are not in communion with the false prophet, so that they can reorient their Christian life in the reception of the sacraments, gifts of Jesus for our salvation. And don't get carried away by this gale of modernist heresies
that tries to destroy the church and the whole world.
We renew our baptismal faith that the powers of hell will not prevail over the church. So it's interesting this way they speak, because there are many people 3 years ago, when we started to criticize the problem that was happening there, no, because they don't criticize Francisco, because we know that the gates of hell will not prevail over the church. So people quote this word without understanding that this promise from Jesus, she refers exactly to the fact that the church is capable of reacting to the impostor. So does it mean that the church doesn't sink?
In the face of the powers of hell.
Because even if the impostor is there, presenting himself as a pagan, there is a reaction. There are people who acknowledge that he is excommunicated and that he cannot govern God's church because he is outside the church of God. And what I am trying to highlight here today is that these people who are now speaking in these terms and wanting to convene the conclave are people who are not from the traditionalist environment. These are normal Catholic people, let's say here, speaking in our Catholic conscience. We realize they do not have the same view that we usually talk about the modern Mass or the errors of Vatican II. But these people, so good, they are aware that Francisco cannot represent joy in any way. And at the same time, their reaction, it's very original because they're appealing for a reaction from the church in the search for an authority. And that's what we need to realize, because there are many, and I start to criticize and to say, look, we resist the talk, or we badmouth the talk, or we don't agree with the talk. But the logic isn't that, because the church is not made of people who fight against stuff. The church is made up of people who obey and venerate the Pope. So our position is not of resistance, our position is resistance.
It's about denouncing the impostor.
I always quote that passage from the Gospel of St. John, when our Lord says
That the shepherd enters through the door. And who enters?
in another place it's a thief and a robber. So to enter through the door, it means going through the same place everyone else has gone. So understanding the issue is quite easy.
When we understand this logic,
It means that he's not a bad pope or someone who's deviating from this or that, but who was elected and is a
He
true
started
one.
the conversation and that's it. It's over. No.
What's up?
impostor.
Why? Because he doesn't come in through the door.
When we say enter through the door, we mean that when,
Someone, hey, leave.
by guys, to be the successor of Peter, that is, to be the vicar of Christ on earth, he has to enter through the door. In other words, go through the same place as everyone else. This means professing the same faith as all the other chats.
So the attitude of everyone
Talking
else.
about the past is to say, look, this talk is my predecessor. He said that, so we have to keep it. This other predecessor of mine, he forbids this, so we have to continue forbidding it.
Why the doors?
That is to say, the path itself, I can't take another path. I can't open a passage in the drought and say, look, there's the door, but leave it there, and now let's go in other ways. Let's create other paths. That's what they are doing, and people say, oh, but Feja, the church is the same. Of course, the flock there is the same, only Jesus made it very clear. Whoever enters through the door is the shepherd of the sheep. Whoever enters from another place, he's a thief and a robber. The church is the same.
But the moment
He entered from another place over there. He already shows his intention.
of making that church shape up to another religion.
And it's there, through that other passage, that he'll start stealing the horses for this other religion. It's called a simple adaptation to the new ones.
Challenging the new mindsets.
So, it's interesting here
When
when
they say that, and they continue,
I'm saying that
They are aware that they are risking the salvation of their souls if they remain silent. So this here is very beautiful, because there are many who are responsible for the classes.
let's go.
As is the case with many birds, many animals who are noticing all this.
let
and
it remain silent, and they will be held accountable by God.
because God asks us to defend the faith, to defend the church, this defense of the church, it is not only made by someone who is at the top of the hierarchy, but all the baptized. All the people who have received baptism in the Catholic Church, these people have the obligation to defend their faith and say, no, this is the Catholic faith that I learned in this faith that I was baptized.
So, look how they finish this letter.
We seek the protection of the Virgin Mary and Mother of God and our Mother, so that through her intercession, the testing time be shortened. To her, Immaculate Conception, Lady of all peoples, co-redeemer, advocate, mediator of all pregnant women, we return with confidence, so that the communion of saints and all those who preceded us may triumph as a church for over 2,000 years. Also to Saint Joseph, protector of the church, terror of the demons, to Saint Michael Archangel, prince of the heavenly militia, to defend us from the demons that roam the world trying to lose souls, and especially those who invade the church. And this stone darkens it stone by stone with the wickedness that rules the Vatican. Come, Lord, without delay. So, here we also leave it in the description, the link from this article, showing all the references there for people to realize the movement they are doing there. How we've said it before, we totally agree with this initiative to promote a conclave so that the church may be provided with a true universal shepherd, because it's essential for the church to have a dialogue, and we can't, under any pretext, deprive the church of a true shepherd, even though we don't have the structure of the Vatican and we don't have the acceptance from all parts of the church. What's important is that we have representation of the whole church in the entire world capable of maintaining this cohesion, and that's necessary. And that's why we cannot rush into a conclave, because the time to get to the selection of a true pope is exactly the time that is necessary to reach all consciences and show the needs, and at the same time to make people aware that this is possible, that it is necessary, that it is a procedure. What is it canonically approved by Catholicism, insofar as the church has protection against this kind of situation. So that's why I brought it here, this article, which we also leave in the description, which was made by Bryce Mitchell, commenting The text, what makes sense, is expensive, together with the writings of Griff Rubin in the United States. So these two writers who did a lot of work, a kiss, smooch, until next time folks, see you. They explained the issue well, and in this article we have a summary of all this doctrine for people to understand what it is about. Of something based on faith in Catholic doctrine. So it says there that when the apostolic faith is vague, there is no supreme authority in the church, but the bishops still have the power to govern their respective dioceses. Then he says, however, for the universal church, no law can be promulgated, no faith dogma.
It can be defined in a situation of being vacant.
To endow itself with this supreme authority, the church has the right and the duty to choose someone to whom this will confer with his vicar. So pay close attention to how he will explain. It is, therefore, obvious that the succession after.
Concerning the sepulchral level,
Can't fail.
Against the church continue to exist because even if the heaven is vacant for many years, the church still maintains the right to elect a legitimate successor that once elected then obtains the supreme authority that was conferred upon him by Christ. So here, this explanation keeps showing that Pisidius Peter, it's vacant when someone illegitimately occupies the position of Pope. In this case, once the church realizes this, that is, there is a representation of the church all over the world. If he's with this awareness, then the church not only has the right
To fill in.
The seat of Peter with the election of a pope.
But it is your duty to do so.
And it continues. Greer Fluid B explains.
And if the Catholic Church is a perfect society, it doesn't need the organization of Vatican II.
That is, of the Conciliar Church.
So, this is a very important topic.
interesting because there are many like these very ones here from Spain who are summoning this conclave.
Who believe that we can live from the Conciliar Church to...
Give the Catholic Church a legitimate church.
But the proposal is exactly for us to be fulfilling, in charge of payment, with someone who is aware that the Conciliar Church is also in tune with the Synodal Church. Because what we are explaining right now is that the church that came from Vatican II, that is, from John III to Benedict XV, she formed an organization there with different paradigms from those on which the Catholic Church was based. But indeed, there was a transformation from Francis to take this revolution to a higher level. So, that's why we say that with the death of Benedict XVI, the Conciliar Church died. And now we have the Synodal Church, as they often call it, because the Synodal Church will heaviest gives of a level of revolution much stronger and much more evident. Because the work of the Conciliar Church it was to maintain that structure for a few years until people better formed in the Catholic faith disappear. So, over the course of 60 years, these people no longer exist. The people who were really aware of Catholicism from the point of view of any doubts, from the point of view of the crystal society, that is, the way we should behave in order to be true Catholics, and it's already over. So, this period of a generation was necessary to make this transition. So the Conciliar Church did its role, possibility of making this transition. Now, of course, many were serving the Conciliar Church with goodwill, with good intentions. But these same ones, when they realized that things are shaping up this way in this so-called Synodal Church, as we are seeing, that's why the article explains very well that for the Catholic Church, her hierarchy does not need the structure, and she doesn't need the organization of Vatican II to endow with valid orders from an authority, a legitimacy, and a canonical structure, or even from a capacity to elect a pope. Looking for these means outside the church, among the heretics, doesn't make sense, or it equates to believing in a diminished church without authority, without jurisdiction, and possessing only a few marks of those that she should possess, that is, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. What ends up leading those who adhere to such a view? For a heretical conception of the church. So the article develops very well these arguments showing
That the Catholic Church,
as he says here, it's a perfect society. So indeed, as explained, in the absence of a pope, we can't have a valid council. We get it here that being John the Thrice illegitimate, he already held an illegal council because he had no authority, not being the true pope.
summon the
you
real-
should still be able to. Here's the first
movement necessary to understand the problem.
is to say that an illegitimate council has already been convened there, which established a new church which does not exist. The same view of the Catholic Church. Indeed, from there, we can't hold a council, that is, to have an authority that can restore the Catholic Church. The only thing we can do is provide the Catholic Church with this legitimate authority. So that's why we say it's an imperfect council. An imperfect council, why? Because it's not convened by a pope. But he simply called lay people, like those in Spain, journalists, people who are advocating Catholicism. And to the extent that church authorities are, whoever they may be, that are aware of the problem and want to, indeed, to take part in this event, these authorities will organize to assemble this perfect council. And as this council reaches consensus and elects a pope, so the pope who is there elected legitimizes the council, dissolve the council, and start disposing of your authority as vicar of Christ. So this is an impressive thing, but it's exactly what happened at the Council of Constance. So if it wasn't for the Council of Constance, which is a unique example in history from an awareness of various sectors of the church that wanted to put an end to a problem. Because at that time we also had a similar issue. We had 3 legs there, and we couldn't proceed as a 3-legged church, to the extent that it was not even possible to be sure which one was the real talk. So that's why it was more complicated, because they weren't heretics. They didn't do this craziness of today. Otherwise, it would be easy. Oh, this one is not good. This one is not good. But this one stays, it's the real one. Wasn't that the case? Were all 3 good? Were they correct? But they were in schism. Now, who was the schismatic and who was the legitimate? It was impossible to know. What was the church's reaction? Imperfect council. And there in this council, without cardinals, there was a consensus in the election of Martin Pinto. We are always explaining this. From this election, the Pope dissolves the council, and he remains in his position, in his authority.
The problem that we have today,
It's an authority issue.
And the whole structure of the Catholic Church is made in the name of this authority. And you can see this from the Epiphany party itself when we read Psalm 71. We notice the beauty from this logic of authority that is given by God, so that His Son may rule the land. So, the true Catholic religion, it will not simply give you a religion to have, to taste a prayer, a mass, a beautiful song. From a moment of elevation to God, This is a Protestant individualistic religion.
But the Catholic Church, it gives us
A kiss. She gives us a society. She gives us a logic, a guidance for the whole society, humanity around a single goal, which is the glory of God. That's the way.
Is that it?
The popes rule the church with an authority that is guaranteed by God above all authorities of temporal powers. And that's why the Magi, when they visit baby Jesus, they bring those gifts. And the gifts, as we've explained before, represent these three powers. The executive, legislative, and judicial branches that we usually say are the three powers are there represented. Why? Because the executive is the temporal power, the power of kings, and this is represented in gold. It means that Christ it's the source of power for a legitimate king who rules the people on his behalf. It's not about democracy, no, in the name of God. This is the logic. And it has a commitment to God. That's why Christ received gold, because it is he who gives power to kings. Then he also received, because myrrh is a bitter plant, it represents mortification. Mortification is related to wisdom, and wisdom is related to legislative power, to the power to judge. The power to judge is the power of the people, of the wise. The wise are those who know, that is, who know all the principles, all the realities, and they are the ones who have to dictate the rules so that things are conducted according to justice. Otherwise, you have no justice. Why doesn't our world have justice? Because it's ruled by fools. It's not governed by wise men. It's not the wise who will say, ooh, the principles are these, the logic is this.
This is what was
And we
done.
always have to follow this path.
So Christ receives myrrh because he gives wisdom to the wise. And the wisdom of Christ is supernatural logic.
So, all right, folks, until next
and
time.
that's what also ruled the church at all times. It's what we call sapiential power.
In the same way, we also have it.
The incense. Therefore, the incense is the spiritual power. And this spiritual power, which is the supreme power, which is the power of the Pope, and it also rules over wisdom and temporal power.
He is so willing.
So cool.
Everything submits to him.
That is the authority of a talker.
Exactly.
Because he is legitimate. And how is he legitimate?
as far as
That he has divine assistance.
it's divine assistance. In other words, this assurance, he holds the keys. The keys were given for him to rule, and he rules precisely because he has a connection with God. And in this bond with God, in this bond with the truth, he can be upfront, representing God and acting with true bravery. So that's why we need, once we've seen that event in Argentina, when the statue of St. Peter was left without the keys, we need it now. Having this awareness at the beginning of the year 2024, that Catholics worldwide need to organize themselves for giving. The Church, a real talk, that with this power of the keys can represent this supreme authority that is capable, even without money, even without support, even with persecutions, it doesn't matter, but with the truth and with union with Christ, he is able to give humanity all the remedies that God needs to give us from the time he rules the Catholic Church. With these principles and these keys that were received by Saint Peter as she accepted to serve Christ in true faith. So that's why in this month of January we are here in Brazil with this disposition to attend to people, to have other conferences, continue explaining about all these subjects that are hard to understand, but through these explanations, people who really intend to stay faithful to God, they can, are you okay? Yes. Receiving important information to follow their path as true Catholics.
Then for that reason,
I hereby invite
people who want to meet us will be there on Sunday, January 21 in Curitiba,
cheers, and then
also on the 25th in Rio de Janeiro, and then on the 28th in Brasilia. So later we will make an announcement with the locations and the ways for people to get in touch.
Okay, that people can also
Participate in these events and in other places too, where we will be there.
So, may God help us.
May the Holy Spirit help us to
we
remain.
remain faithful to what God asks of us. May He be blessed forever.
See you next time. Bye.